On April 1st, 2023, America's top-selling beer made a decision that would cost them over $1 billion.
The book, Last Call for Bud Light. It takes a deep dive into how the beer lost its position as America's most popular.
A single Instagram post destroyed a 20-year empire. Sales plummeted 25% within weeks, allowing their competitor, Modelo Especial, to snatch away the crown they'd held since 2001. Over 400 employees would lose their jobs before summer ended. The brand that once defined American beer culture would never recover. Kid Rock shot cases of Bud Light with an automatic weapon, and the video exploded across social media with millions watching the destruction unfold. Dylan Mulvaney never even appeared in an official Bud Light commercial. Just one Instagram post featuring a promotional can sparked a boycott that lasted longer than most celebrity careers. Could your company survive losing $1 billion in less than a year? What was on that Instagram post that triggered this nuclear reaction? To understand how America's beer king fell this hard, we need to go back to April 1st. But first, if you want more stories about billion-dollar mistakes like this, hit that like button and subscribe to the Money Legends YouTube channel. Dylan Mulvaney had 1.8 million Instagram followers when Bud Light sent her a custom beer can with her face on it. This celebrated a milestone in her gender transition. Mulvaney was a transgender influencer who'd built a massive audience documenting her transition across TikTok and Instagram. She received the personalized can as part of a sponsored partnership. On April 1st, she posted a video during March Madness promoting Bud Light, less than 1 minute long. The can was never actually sold to the public. For 48 hours, nothing happened. The post seemed destined to fade into the endless stream of influencer marketing. But then Kid Rock shattered the silence on April 3rd with a video that would ignite a firestorm. Wearing a MAGA hat and wielding an MP5 submachine gun, he unloaded on cases of Bud Light. He shouted directly into the camera, "Fuck Bud Light and fuck Anheuser-Busch." That video racked up 11 million views within a month. Conservative commentators and politicians immediately seized on that moment. Within days, the narrative crystallized across right-wing media and social platforms. Bud Light had betrayed working-class America by embracing woke politics. The backlash framed this as corporate abandonment. A beer brand that had spent decades positioning itself as the drink of backyard barbecues and football Sundays was now choosing a transgender influencer to represent them. Social media erupted with boycott calls as the hashtag spread like wildfire. Bars across conservative states started ripping Bud Light taps from their establishments. Videos of people dumping out six-packs went viral. Distributors watched in growing horror as inventory sat untouched on shelves. Bud Light had been America's best-selling beer for 2 decades. It represented everything from 4th of July celebrations to tailgate parties. In just 48 hours, all of that cultural capital was suddenly in jeopardy. The boycott gained terrifying momentum. 2 weeks after the post went live, Anheuser-Busch CEO Brendan Whitford found himself forced to respond. April 14th brought the company's first official statement. Whitford's statement claimed the company never intended to be part of a discussion that divides people. The carefully crafted words satisfied absolutely no one. Conservatives dismissed it as a pathetic non-apology that was far too weak. LGBTQ+ advocates felt betrayed by a company that abandoned its partner at the first sight of backlash. Notably, Whitworth never even mentioned Dylan Mulvaney by name. The woman at the center of the controversy received nothing but radio silence from Bud Light. No support, no communication, no acknowledgement whatsoever. Meanwhile, the boycott was organizing itself with frightening efficiency. Social media accounts began tracking which bars still carried Bud Light. Organized groups coordinated pressure campaigns against retailers. Conservative influencers posted daily updates that kept the outrage burning fresh. Bars that pulled Bud Light from their taps advertised it as a badge of honor. "We don't serve Bud Light" became a marketing message in itself. Distributors faced harassment everywhere they delivered. Drivers reported verbal confrontations at stops. Some refused to wear company shirts in public out of fear. By April 20th, the situation had escalated from a PR crisis to a genuine safety concern. Company facilities required security responses as threats pouring in. The timing couldn't have been worse. Memorial Day and 4th of July were approaching, the 2 biggest beer selling periods of the year worth hundreds of millions in revenue. As Bud Light hemorrhaged customers right as summer began, panic set in at headquarters. Within weeks of the controversy erupting, Alyssa Heinerscheid, the VP of Marketing who'd overseen the Mulvaney partnership, was placed on leave. Days later, her boss, Daniel Blake, followed. Neither executive would ever return to the company. Anheuser-Busch refused to publicly say fired to avoid potential lawsuits, but everyone understood the message being sent. Bud Light first claimed the title of America's best-selling beer in 2001. For 20 consecutive years, they held the crown through every quarter and every challenge, a remarkable streak. But that ended on May 31st, 2023, when Modelo Especial overtook Bud Light with 8.4% of U.S. retail beer sales. The first time in history that a Mexican import had become America's top-selling beer. 20 years of absolute dominance had crumbled in just 8 weeks. And the numbers just kept getting worse. Bud Light sales dropped between 25 and 30% compared to the same period in 2022. That national average masked even more catastrophic collapses in conservative markets. Across the South and Midwest, some areas saw drops as high as 50%. One distributor summed up the situation perfectly. Sales cratered and sat there with no signs of recovery. No bounce back, just week after week of catastrophically low numbers that refused to improve. By late June, sales were still down 28% for the week ending June 24th. Unlike typical consumer backlashes that fade within weeks, this boycott had become permanent. Imagine a beer distributor's warehouse in Texas during mid-June 2023. Pallets of Bud Light sat stacked 20 feet high, untouched for weeks and gathering dust in the summer heat. The distributor walked those aisles every morning. He remembered how just last summer, these same pallets would empty within days, trucks leaving full and returning for more loads because Bud Light was guaranteed money. Easy money that now sat worthless. His phone rang with yet another bar canceling their order. Retailers began treating Bud Light like toxic inventory, slashing prices with deep discounts that sometimes dropped below the cost of bottled water. Store managers moved cases to back corners where customers wouldn't see them. Premium shelf space went to Modelo and Michelob, while Bud Light got relegated to the bottom shelf. Meanwhile, Miller Lite and Coors Light saw only minimal declines. This proved that customers weren't abandoning beer or rejecting all major brands. They were specifically and deliberately targeting Bud Light with surgical precision. By summer's end, Bud Light had fallen all the way to third place, behind both Modelo and Michelob Ultra. That Memorial Day to July 4th peak season, worth hundreds of millions in sales, happened while Bud Light could only watch helplessly from the sidelines. On July 27, 2023, Anheuser-Busch announced layoffs affecting hundreds of corporate employees. These people had absolutely nothing to do with the Dillon Mulvaney partnership. Between 350 and 400 North American employees lost their jobs in the cuts, roughly 2% of the company's U.S. workforce. These weren't the executives who made the decision. These weren't the marketing team who coordinated the partnership. These were regular employees who'd spent years or even decades building careers at Anheuser-Busch, working in corporate offices, finance departments, and regional management positions. They never knew about the Mulvaney partnership until it exploded. One laid-off employee captured the devastation in a Reddit post. "This destroyed my family's future." Former staff members described the atmosphere inside the company as panic and rash decision-making. Layoffs that felt desperate and reactionary as the company scrambled to cut costs while revenue evaporated. But corporate employees weren't the only casualties of this disaster. Small business owners who'd built entire operations around Bud Light distribution watched their revenues collapse overnight. Some had run family businesses for generations. One anonymous distributor revealed they were still trying to recover a year later, as damage to their bottom line had become permanent. Then on June 29th, Dillon Mulvaney finally broke her silence. The company that had partnered with her still hadn't reached out since the controversy erupted. Never offered support. Never even checked in, as she faced months of death threats and harassment from millions directing their rage at her personally. Mulvaney's assessment was damning. Bud Light's handling of it was worse than not hiring a trans person at all. Her words exposed a company that had used her identity for marketing without providing any support when it mattered most. In May, Anheuser-Busch lost its top rating from the Human Rights Campaign for LGBTQ+ workplace equality. They found themselves criticized from both sides. Conservatives saw them as too woke, while LGBTQ+ advocates saw them as cowards who'd abandoned their principles. Everyone involved had paid a terrible price. The employees who lost their jobs, the small business owners losing their livelihoods, and Dylan Mulvaney facing death threats alone. Bud Light's reputation lay destroyed from every conceivable angle. On February 24th, almost a year after the April Fool's Day post, CNN calculated the total damage. Over $1.4 billion in lost sales. Not theoretical losses or stock value. Actual sales that simply never happened. The bleeding refused to stop even as months passed and seasons changed. By July 2024, more than a year after the controversy first erupted, sales were still down 18.6% year over year. 16 months later, customers still weren't coming back. This boycott had outlasted typical consumer backlashes by many months, transforming from a temporary outrage cycle into something permanent and unshakable. August 2024 brought even more bad news. Anheuser-Busch announced the closure of its Massachusetts distribution facility, eliminating 193 jobs. The company attributed the move to operational efficiency. Industry analysts directly linked it to sustained lower volumes. Fewer sales simply meant fewer workers needed. Then in 2025, former Anheuser-Busch executives began speaking publicly about what had gone wrong. They confessed mistakes with remarkable candor. One anonymous former executive told the media that the problem was they just were not an authentic partnership at all. Another revealed, "I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop." That quote revealed everything about a company where people understood the risks, saw the dangers, knew their customer base, yet the decision happened anyway. Bud Light launched damage control campaigns throughout the late 2023 and into 2024. Running ads featuring blue-collar workers and traditional American imagery in a desperate attempt to win back their base. None of it worked. The needle refused to move. Some bars and retailers that had removed Bud Light during the boycott's peak never brought it back. The market shift became permanent as shelf space went to competitors and stayed there. Bud Light hasn't recovered its top position in the U.S. market. It remains stuck in third place behind Modelo and Michelob Ultra. The brand that once dominated American beer culture spent over a year trying to claw back market share, rebuild broken trust, and convince customers to return. But customers had already moved on. The damage was complete, and no amount of advertising could undo what had been destroyed. While Bud Light imploded in spectacular fashion, Modelo Especial didn't just take the top spot. They expanded their dominance and pulled even further ahead. Modelo had been steadily growing for years before the boycott. Their Fighting Spirit campaign resonated with consumers seeking authenticity, telling real stories about real people without gimmicks or manipulation. When Bud Light collapsed, Modelo simply accelerated their existing successful strategy. Rather than opportunistically capitalizing on the drama, they stayed true to their brand identity as their market share surged. By the time Bud Light realized what was happening, Modelo had pulled so far ahead that catching up had become mathematically impossible. But Modelo wasn't the only winner in this reshuffled market. Michelob Ultra climbed to second place, while Yuengling Lager saw approximately 20% growth during the same period. Even smaller craft brands gained ground as consumers explored alternatives. Constellation Brands, which own Modelo, watched their stock price surge dramatically. The company's market value increased by billions as Modelo ascended to become America's beer of choice. Customers weren't rejecting beer as a category or abandoning all major brewing companies. They were specifically and surgically targeting Bud Light. The vacuum left by Bud Light's fall didn't flow to a single replacement. Instead, it redistributed across multiple competitors. Some brands took larger shares, others claimed smaller pieces, but everyone gained something of value. Those gains became permanent fixtures. Bars that switched to Modelo or Michelob Ultra never switched back. Consumers who discovered Yuengling kept buying it, and shelf space that went to competitors stayed there through every season. The American beer market had fundamentally restructured itself. 20 years of Bud Light dominance erased, and a new competitive landscape emerged where multiple brands now fought for the top position. Business schools quickly began using the Bud Light boycott as a case study in what not to do. How to lose $1 billion, how understanding your audience matters more than any marketing trend, and the catastrophic consequences of misjudging your customer base. The story became a warning that echoed through boardrooms everywhere, a cautionary tale about brand authenticity and knowing who your customers actually are. Bud Light's fall had changed the entire industry forever. In the age of social media, a single marketing decision can destroy decades of dominance in a matter of weeks. Bud Light proved this brutal truth beyond any doubt. 20 years of being America's top beer vanished in 2 months. In our polarized world, every marketing choice carries risks that compound with terrifying speed. The lesson is both simple and brutal. You cannot be everything to everyone, and trying to appeal to new audiences while ignoring your core base is exactly how billion-dollar brands die spectacular deaths. Bud Light wanted younger, more progressive consumers, but they built their empire on working-class America with traditional values, backyard barbecues, and football Sundays. You can't serve both masters anymore. Not in this environment. Not with this level of cultural division, and not when one misstep can trigger permanent rejection. The executives who knew it was wrong but couldn't stop it represent the real tragedy here. Corporate dysfunction that cost hundreds of people their jobs and destroyed what was once a cultural icon. Some business mistakes are permanent. No undo button, no recovery campaign that brings back lost trust. Bud Light learned this lesson in the most expensive way possible. What do you think? Could Bud Light have survived this controversy with a different response? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more stories about billion-dollar business disasters and the lessons they teach, hit that subscribe button. What we're covering next is even more shocking than this one. Thanks for watching. Click here to watch our next video. It's a cracker.